essence and expression. There's essence and there's expression. Our essence is the infinite within us. That can't be altered. Something that's outside of measurement, something that's outside of articulation, something that's outside of form. It's the God within all of us. It's what connects us all. It's the source. And then we have expression. What we enact, what we embody. Through the selections available, we make choices, I guess. Selections. Choices from a constrained pool. And we put them into form. And our form is it can be something that's reflecting our essence, or something that's severed from our essence, and all the variations in between. And as far as I can see it, our essence is that untouchable pool. Our expression is a current state, and we can always return to an orientation with our essence. And essence is tapped into when we're present. Essence is tapped into when we're present. Essence is tapped into when we remember that we're not immovable. That our expression isn't static. That we can develop, progress, change, adapt. And that we're not in control of other people's expressions. We're only in control of our own. And in the current state of structure, I find to see our where we're at right now is that we don't really seem to be very good at controlling our own expressions. And that we seem to have strayed far from it. For a number of reasons, but one of which being that we think that we have to be the way that we've been, because that's the proof that we've built through our expression, through our selections. We look back to see who it is that we think that we are and who it is that we think we can be. And if we limit ourselves to that, we're not going to be able to be something different than that. But we can always return to our essence at any time. This doesn't mean that we should expect other people to see our essence. What other people can see is our expression. And our expression is able to be something that represents our essence, though we stray from it all the time. But it can always be returned to. And a cold, impartial way of understanding this is actually kind of liberating. You know, I think there's different ways that people relate to other people's essence and expression, right? Like, I can see the God in other people, but that doesn't mean their expressions don't have tangible consequence, right? seeing the God in someone else, seeing the essence in someone else, doesn't mean their expressions don't affect me. Doesn't mean they need millions and millions of chances to be in my energy, to be in my space, to put my shit at risk. I can see the God in them and I can create clear boundary. I can see the essence in them and know that their expression is a temporary state. I can hold space for that potential and I can protect myself. And when I see that in myself, I grant that to others. If I can't grant that in others, I can't grant it in myself. And so it becomes a grace, but not a moral grace, like, just give them another chance, everybody. Blah, blah, blah. We see the essence in ourselves. We see that we're in control of our expression where we're in control of our expression. And where we're in control of our expression, we can line that up with something that reflects our essence. And that being where we are when we are where we are, even if we don't like where we are, allows us to see where we are. And then we can use that as ground to get where we'd like to go. You know, I've made the mistake of saying, oh, just give them a break. Their expression isn't a permanent state. Therefore, I should just see their essence and keep giving them chance after chance after chance and putting my life and my consequence and all that at risk because I just want to see the God in them. Okay. Well, I'm going to keep getting the fucking consequence of that shit. If I keep fucking doing that. That doesn't mean don't see the God in them. And the repeated expression that we enact builds our structure, builds our constraint, builds our possibility, where we have agency available. Where we have agency available, this is a concept outside of what's fair, what's right, what we think should be. It's about acknowledging what is. It's an acceptance, not a condoning, but an acceptance. And when we live in that acceptance, we can identify our constraints and our possibilities. And when we tie our worth not to a material outcome, and not just an idea of our essence, but to a committed practice to coming back to returning to the linking of our essence and expression, which can take an iron stomach. It takes a fucking iron stomach, you know, because of our own selections, because of our own choices from the constrained set we had. We were witness to those. We don't need to believe in an idea of an external deity to know that we've been witness to our selections. We've been witness to our selections. So it takes an iron stomach to see how far we've fallen. It takes an iron stomach to orient to what it is that we can do. It's not fair. It's fair. You want to wait around for what's fair? You think the fucking governments of the world are going to fucking figure out what's fucking fair and enforce that? From who? To what perspective? Hold your breath. See how long you'll be around for that one. But when we identify our constraints and our possibilities and we accept them and not condone them, but take our agency into our own hands and pay the cost because we see the value of developing that agency. And that value is a non-material value that we have access to that's not dependent on condition. It's not dependent on condition. It's not fucking dependent on condition. We can always be developing that agency. We can always be finding that liberation within constraint. Always. That doesn't mean we get the outcome that we want. That doesn't mean the material outcome pulls through for us. That doesn't mean we don't want the material outcome. It means we don't tie our fucking well-being to something that we don't fucking control. It means that we pay the cost because we see the value of something that's non-material. But that's something that's non-material is something that has very real consequence for us, very real constraint, very real possibility, right? It develops real constraint and real possibilities. And that non-material value that we pay a cost for when we see the value as higher than the cost is something that can't be fucking taken from us unless we fucking stop paying the cost, unless we give it up, And so that becomes the security that's possible here on earth because yes, material security matters. Yes, material outcomes matter. Yes, absolutely, 100%, right? But they're variable. They can't be guaranteed. So when we look for security in the material, we can see that it cannot be guaranteed. It cannot be guaranteed. So where does how can we do the math so we're not operating from a deficit? How can we do the math so we're not operating from a deficit? How can we pay the cost? How can we pay the cost? In a way, in a regular way, in a behavior change fucking way. How can we do the repeated action where we can pay a cost that's high as fuck and variable as fuck and goes up and down with conditions, right? High as fuck. This is spirit math. I'm not talking money. This is the fucking cost value situation. When we say I'm going to pay the fucking cost because I want the fucking material outcome or need it. We need material outcome. So if I'm paying the fucking cost because I need the fucking material outcome and I'm tying my fucking well-being to that, then I've tied myself to something I don't control. And I've tied myself to something that's up and down. But if I do the cost value exchange, it becomes this idea of sacrifice, but not a sacrifice as giving something up for maybe getting something back, but for the immediate return. The cost becomes an exchange. It becomes an exchange. It's a transaction that happens immediately because the value is non-material. And because you see the value as greater than the cost, you pay it. And you don't have to will yourself to pay it. You don't have to force yourself to pay it. If you see the non-material value as greater, you want the more. You want the more. And then you don't operate from a deficit because you're not waiting for a fucking material outcome to fucking perform a particular way. Not that you don't want or need the material outcome. It's not about that. Yes, we care about those things. And in fact, paying the cost is what enables that thing to happen. It enables that thing to happen. It puts you in the position to get the material outcome. But on a fucking spirit math perspective, you're not going to be operating from a deficit waiting for something to perform in a particular way that can't be guaranteed. And every fucking middleman of the unknown is going to fucking promise you that they can guarantee you fucking material security, and nobody can fucking do that. Nobody. And that's why you see the fucking wealthiest people in the fucking world, they don't have a security because they fucking know it. In their cells. And they're unconscious. Because we want that security. The security is what we seek. But if we seek material in the security, it cannot be guaranteed. No matter if you have billions and zillions of dollars. The material security cannot be fucking promised. And we keep seeking that direction to get that security. We're not going to. That doesn't mean material outcome doesn't have consequence. It does. Of course it does. We live in the material. We need it. We need these outcomes. But when we pay the cost, and especially when we're looking to see a change in our behavior, right? We want to see a change in our behavior in a repeated way, in a way that through that repetition, it gets easier over time. How do we do it? How do we do it? How do we do it? We got to see the value is higher than the cost. And the cost is high as fuck. The cost is high as fuck. And the cost is variable, goes up and down with condition. So how are we going to pay a cost that's high as fuck and up and down with condition? How are we going to do it? Again, this is spirit math. I'm not talking money. How are we going to do it? How are we going to do it? We're going to see the value as greater, because when the value is greater, the non-material value is greater. When the non-material value is greater than the cost, it becomes an exchange of value. It becomes an exchange of something of lesser value in exchange for something of greater value. Boom. Trade. It doesn't become this idea of sacrifice of do the thing, and then wait for hope for the fucking material outcome. Need the external world that you don't control to perform a particular way for you to feel justified in paying that cost. You don't have to operate from a deficit. Yes, you want the material. Yes, you want the outcome. Yes, it's a carrot on a stick. Yes, it's more than a carrot on a stick. The material outcome is more than a carrot on a stick. Yet, and we don't fucking control it. We don't fucking control it. Nobody fucking does. And people will promise it to you all day long. It cannot be guaranteed. So if we're seeking that fucking security in the material, it doesn't fucking exist. And we will operate in a deficit doing this cost value shit. But we do the cost value when we relate to the value as non-material. We have to find the non-material value as greater than the cost. And the cost is high as fuck, and the cost is variable, and the cost goes up and down with condition. So how do we pay a cost that's high as fuck, that's variable, that goes up and down with condition? How do we fucking do it? We don't do the exchange for the material value. We do the exchange for the non-material value. And then the exchange is done immediately. It's a transaction that's done immediately. We exchange something of lesser value for something of greater value. Well, what does that mean? What does that mean? That means that we might want a specific material outcome, and we might do a fucking thing to fucking get it. But these things need to be done repeatedly in order to get the results. And the material results can't be fucking promised. Or they can be promised. They can't be guaranteed. So instead, if we find a non-material value, this means something of the spirit. Something of the spirit, right? So in the example of, I'll use the example of how I quit smoking. Smoking was something I absolutely fucking loved. Absolutely fucking loved. Absolutely fucking loved. Needed, loved. Obsessed. Couldn't picture myself quitting smoking. Why? Because I pictured myself resisting something that I really wanted, resisting it for the rest of my life. It sounded like absolute fucking torture. So the cost was really high in my mind. The cost was very high. Very high. So high, I couldn't imagine ever fucking doing it. So my prayer became, I want to quit. I want to quit. I want to quit. I want to quit. You know? And then it's like, try to convince yourself, oh, health and blah, blah, blah. You know, health, wrinkles, blah, blah, money, you know. All material outcomes that if the cost was paid, I'd be more likely to get, right? More likely to fucking save that money, more likely to have more health, blah, blah, blah. Not motivating, if I'm being honest, not motivating at all. Why? Because the cost is too high. The cost is too high, especially when I'm picturing spending a life resisting the thing that I want the most. Why the fuck? Nothing was high enough of a value in the material for me to fucking give a shit. Because the cost was too fucking high. You know? Sure, smoking caused the problem that it created, but smoking caused the problem that it solved, but it solved problems. again and again and again. It was an easy problem to solve. Get another cigarette. But it solved problems. You know? It was an outlet. It was a place for me to go. I could be in pain and I could feel better. Really. So the cost of giving that up, too high if it's about a material outcome. You know, and this isn't the case for everybody. That's motivating for some people. But those material outcomes aren't guaranteed. They're not. Well, I'm like, maybe the money, but, you know, like, the concept still stands. Because what ended up happening was that I identified a non-material value that became so high that it justified the paying of the cost. I realized if I wasn't addicted to cigarettes, I wouldn't be addicted anymore on a physical level. Once I got through a period of discomfort, it wouldn't be addictive anymore. So then it became an issue of, can I get through a temporary discomfort if I'm also getting a value, a non-material value that's higher than the cost? And what's the non-material value? And for me, it was I wanted to be capable of sustained thought. I wanted to be able to develop things. And it required a presence from me that I didn't have. When I smoked, I'd always rather be smoking. And when I was smoking, it wasn't even that cigarette I wanted. It was the next one I was after. 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 So, the non-material value was my freedom, was my presence, was my ability to be where I was. And when I saw that it was a cost of physical temporary discomfort, but that value would be received immediately, you know, maybe the sustained thought, it wasn't immediate, actually, you know, because I had to get through the temporary discomfort that's physical and doing something repeatedly enough so that becomes easier. Where what I was repeating before was easier, but as soon as I start repeating something else, that becomes easier and easier and easier. But there is a period of transition and period of discomfort where it's very uncomfortable. But the non-material value also lies in developing that agency in myself. Because when that agency becomes chosen, selected, no matter the condition, then I build that in myself, and that becomes a ground beneath my feet that nobody else can fucking take from me. Nobody. It becomes a ground beneath my feet that is there despite any fucking condition. Any. And so when I look for security, when I want security, I can build it, and it's non-material. And so the cost can be high, but that value is so high that it just becomes, of course I'll pay it. Of course. You know, with an understanding that I can endure periods of discomfort voluntarily. If what I'm getting is my freedom, because to me, that was the math, that was the fucking math that I wanted. You know, and smoking had been framed as freedom to me. It was a don't tell me what to fucking do, you're not my fucking daddy. You know what I mean? Just like, me against the world, like I've got my fucking thing, I've got my freedom, I've got my escape, I've got my reprieve, I've got my, you know, pain reliever, essentially. Smoking cigarettes. You know, you're in spiritual fucking psychological pain, it's a relief. And so how can you pay the cost of giving that up unless the value, the non-material value, is so great? And so what ended up happening is I'm not living a life resisting the things that I really want. It's not a paying of the cost that's about the material value. That's a fucking cherry on top. the health and the not spending the money and it's a fucking cherry on top. The freedom, the fucking liberation from that fucking parasitic fucking addiction is the value. And the value is so great. You know, the ability to be present, dude. To have the fucking iron stomach to fucking face where it is that I am when I am where I am. It's a non-material value. And when we do that cost-value exchange, when the value is non-material, we're not operating from a deficit. I'm not waiting for the fucking external material to perform in a particular way for me to feel justified for having paid that cost. And then if the world doesn't perform in that particular way, now it's up in question whether I want to keep paying the cost. So how do we have longevity with that choice? But when it's an exchange that's done immediately and it's about the non-material value as being greater than the paying of the cost, we put ourselves in a position to make that choice repeatedly, to make that decision, that selection repeatedly. It's not dependent on condition. It's something greater. And that something greater in that repetition of choice, that repetition of the paying of the cost, it builds into a structure that has constraint and possibility. It builds into a structure that has fucking sweet inertia. It lowers resistance to repeating that pattern. It has a lowered resistance to repeating that pattern. You know, what we do repeatedly becomes easier to repeat.